So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Married with Sakura. So let's start the series. A delicate beam of light sneaked and tossed a break in the blinds. Gradually, the light enlightened the items in the room. A beige dresser, a shelf packed with coarse books and parchments, dull green sheet material, a solitary picture in an edge on an end table, until at last the light sparkled across her face. A wreck of tangled pink hair thrashed around, as the young lady who occupied the room gradually mixed, in the end, and with extraordinary pain. She constrained open her eyes and the light shined off jade as she constrained herself to sit up. Sakura Haruno extended her arms up over her head and moaned. Extraordinary. One more night with scarcely any rest, she contemplated internally. She removed a clasp from her wrist and rapidly tied her medium-length hair behind her head prior to clearing the rest out of her eyes. She grappled with the harmony that opened her blinds, subsequent to figuring out how to open them. She was welcomed by seeing the town concealed in the leaves of her home. She accepted in a full breath as she noticed the regular folks down underneath. Such countless grinning faces. She saw a young lady excursion and fall before her more youthful sibling raced to her side to help her up. She looked as their mom strolled over and got the kid, and each of them three giggled. She let out a delicate laugh herself. We did it, we truly did, all the battling, all the battle. This is the reason. This is the very thing that it drove as well. She turned her view up toward the extraordinary stone countenances of the Hokage landmark. The conflict was finished. It had been for a long time. Such countless lives had been lost. Thus many fights had been battled. Yet in the cinders rose a ninja town and a ninja world that was more grounded and more joined than any other time in recent memory. She recollected every one of the burial services and deluge of patients at the emergency clinic that came after the last fight. How troublesome the modifying had been. Things had at last begun to settle down. The town had totally recuperated from the pain assault preceding the conflict, and had even begun growing. Over the extraordinary stone faces there were indications of another piece of Konoha that was coming to fruition. This part scarcely looked like the town down underneath, as metal bars and shafts addressed the development of engineering. The homes and places of the town she experienced childhood in were being supplanted with transcending high rises and extravagance lofts. She comprehended that this would have been the new business locale of Konoha, yet she was exceptionally happy that her profession would preferably not take her there frequently. Still, she was appreciative for the harmony that permitted such a spot to be plausible in any case, a harmony that he achieved she contemplated internally. She hung over and got the outlined photo she kept on her end table. She grasped it and peered down on it, and zeroed in on the substance of a dim-haired scowling man with his arms collapsed across his chest. Yet in a little while she found her look moving to the blonde shinobi copying his position on the right. She was unable to help a grin framing all the rage as she turned her view back towards the town. What's more, our conflict is over too, she thought. They had made it happen. Despite everything, they had figured out how to bring their companion home. They had brought Sasuke Uchiha back from the murkiness that consumed him. It had nearly cost them their lives. Damnation, it nearly cost everybody on the planet their lives. Yet they had gotten it done. As a matter of fact, she realized that he had truly gotten it done. She thought back to the blonde in the photo, Naruto Uzumaki, her valuable partner, 33% of Group 7, the number 1 hyperactive knucklehead ninja, way behind everyone in his group, presently the town legend, the ninja world's legend. He had overcome everyone's presumption, including her own, and rose from nothing to the most elite. He was popular all through the world, the most probable contender to supplant her previous master as the following Hokage. And in particular, he was her closest companion, since he had returned from his long-term preparing trip with Jiraiya. Both of them had become close. They were close previously. However, she realized she scolded and offended him undeniably more than she ought to have, and it required her a long investment to move past the disgrace of a portion of the things she had shared with him. She actually wasn't done with this, yet she perceived that given the manner in which everyone in the town treated him, she was not completely to fault. Not that has prevented her from accusing herself. She did that sufficient. Yet it was after the conflict that both of them had become indistinguishable. They had brought Sasuke back. Yet when he accepted his prosthetic arm, he set out on his own excursion to make up for his wrongdoings. She recalled how he had needed to carry on with the remainder of his existence with one arm, before Naruto persuaded him that the town's power would be fundamentally debilitated, assuming that Sasuke had an impairment. In the end he concurred and accepted his prosthetic. She likewise recalled that him denying her the potential chance to go along with him on his excursion. Prior to leaving he had tapped her on the temple, exactly the way in which his sibling used to do to him, and told her he would be back ultimately. Yet it was his last words as he strolled the way out of the entryways of the town that stayed with her. Furthermore, you're required here more than you know. And with that, he had left the town, however not prior to accepting his headband from his sibling, consenting to settle things between them when he returned. Those words stayed with her, since she detected a deeper significance in his message, yet right up till now couldn't unravel what he implied. She knew her job as a doctor was significant. However, she didn't believe that was what Sasuke was referring to. She likewise was essentially less miserable than she was expecting at the dismissal. She knew, where it counts in her heart, that Sasuke was not an ideal one for her, and over the most recent 2 years, she had understood that she really focused on him as a companion and a colleague. Yet a few injuries couldn't recuperate. She was unable to behave like he was the very Sasuke that he was before he left, and she was unable to disregard the way that he had harmed so many, that he had harmed her, that he had harmed Naruto. She could excuse and continue on, yet she never again was fit for having a similar affection toward the Uchiha. Sorting it out had not been simple, yet she had dealt with and acknowledged her own affections for some time now. Once more, since the Uchiha left, Sakura and Naruto had become as chummy. They prepared together, ate dinners together, hung out together. She even had an extra arrangement of garments at his place as she remained at his condo no less than one time each week. It was nearer to the medical clinic since she took over as partner head specialist, under the initiative of her tutor, the 5th Hokage. She some of the time must be at the clinic at foul hours toward the beginning of the day, and remaining 15 minutes nearer to work had a significant effect. On those evenings, Naruto dozed on the love seat in the family room while she took the bed. She would have happily taken the lounge chair, yet he had demanded, and it was one of their couple of conflicts he had really won. Both of them were really close, and she wouldn't offer that for anything, which is the reason the most recent 14 days had been extremely bizarre and, to her extraordinary astonishment, miserable for her. Kakashi had called them into his office 14 days prior to tell them that Sasuke had completed his excursion of reclamation and was returning home to remain in the town until further notice. She believed that Naruto would have been euphoric to have his sibling home. So she was astounded when he appeared to be practically miserable to hear the news. "Naruto, what's wrong? I figured you would be euphoric to have him back," Kakashi had asked him. As fast as it had seemed, the miserable look all over evaporated. "Sorry, Kakashi Master. I recently was pondering how now I need to watch out for him once more. I trust the rat's less mopey than he was the point at which he left." He put his unmistakable smile on, yet Sakura could perceive something was off base. Nonetheless, she chose to get some information about it later. Tragically for her, later never came. Since that day, he had barely seen her. They hadn't hung out alone once, and their possibly contact was the point at which he was on a task for Kakashi at the emergency clinic. He had acted peculiarly and the situation was annoying her. Then, at that point when Sasuke returned 7 days prior, she expected Naruto had invested all of his energy into ensuring his companion was adjusted and assisting him with changing. She comprehended that he was occupied, yet she would have loved for him to make additional opportunity for her, and it shocked her exactly the amount she missed being with him. The sensations of reliance on him had been there for some time, she knew this. Yet she didn't believe that him not being around would meaningfully affect her. "Whatever, he is occupied and dislike he owes me anything," she contemplated internally. "Furthermore, we have a mission, Totoro. No. She broke herself out of her own thinking and checked the close down for the day. 7:35. Damn it, I will be late, she hollered. She hurled herself up, bounced into her colder time of year clothing as quick as possible, and went into the lounge prepared to leave. Morning brow, she was welcomed to her closest companion and flatmate, who was tasting tea at the little eating table close to the kitchen. Sakura grasped her clenched hand as a vein popped in her sanctuary. She was happy that she and Ino had chosen to get a loft together a year prior, and she cherished the young lady to death. However, was not in that frame of mind for any of her remarks earlier today. I advised you to quit referring to me that pig, as she said. Yet sick arrangement with you later, I'm as of now late. And with that she got a piece of organic product from a bushel on the counter and opened the front entryway. She hopped onto the rooftop as the virus winter air hammered her in the face as she headed towards the third preparation grounds. Sakura leaped out of the trees and landed delicately at the entry to the preparation grounds. She took a gander at the scene unfurling before her and couldn't resist the opportunity to grin. The preparation field was partitioned in the center by a little waterway. On the entry sat 16 youthful foundation understudies, all of which appeared to be excessively eager to stand by. She timed the way that more than one of them was sporting orange, and felt somewhat irritated that her partner had really figured out how to make the variety into a style. Behind the youngsters stood a tall grown-up with his hair restricted over his head, and with an enormous panic spread evenly across his face. He was quick to see her appearance. "Sakura, it's great to see you. Happy you could make it today?" Irika said as she agreed with a spot by his position. She grinned energetically at him and gestured her head. "Obviously, master. Happy I could help with those too. I have an inclination I will be mending someone rather rapidly." She chuckled and Irika expressed something about how she was correct. Yet in addition how he had a couple of youthful surgeons in his group that admired her and needed to meet her. She gestured her head and grinned, prior to directing her concentration toward the opposite side of the waterway. Her heart accelerated as she prepared herself for the scene before her, and simultaneously, she was thrilled that she had lived to witness the day this could. Across the water stood two shinobi, gazing strongly at one another. On the left stood a man with dim dark hair covering one of his eyes and a glare scratched upon his face. He was clad in all dark, with a cape that covered his straightforward, dark uniform under. He disposed of his cape and the peak weaved on the rear of his shirt materialized, a peak he wore with more pride than nearly anything more in his life. He radiated a quiet, strong presence that she could feel as far as possible from where she remained. While she was utilized to it, the monitor's energy never neglected to send a chill down her spine. Albeit not for the reasons it utilized as well, the inclination disappeared. Nonetheless, when she moved her look to the man on the right, Naruto Uzumaki remained at full level with his hands crossed across his chest. He was engaged, considering nothing else except for the one who remained before him. Conversely, however, his energy was warm and welcoming, yet comparably strong. He stood certain and his eyes expressed it was absolutely impossible that in damnation he would lose, and he had the history to back it up. He wore a dark coat with an orange zipper that went as far as possible up to the neck area, matched with his unmistakable orange jeans. On his arm he had a band with his own tribe's image on it. She recollected the quarrel he had made when she took him shopping to purchase his new coat. He had griped the former one turned out only great. Notwithstanding the face, it was worn out, and scarcely fit him after his most recent development spray. It actually shocked her he turned out to be taller than she was by very nearly a foot. He had possibly surrendered when she proposed to get him lunch on the off chance that he just attempted it for a couple of days. And he hadn't taken it off since, unexpectedly, his center was broken as he detected her presence. He turned and his look met hers and an energetic smile spread across his face and his hand shot up and waved to her. "Sakura-chan!" He shouted and began jumping all over as though to definitely stand out enough to be noticed. She shut her eyes and a vein popped in her brow. "I can see you, you dolt! You better keep on track or you will lose this time, she hollered back, and was entertained at his guarded response. A portion of the understudies snickered and she grinned at him. He realized he was being made tomfoolery off, yet shook it off and turned around to Sasuke, who had an egotistical look all over. What are you checking out? Both of you are both so irritating, he said, prior to putting his hand on the handle of his katana. You prepared to get everything rolling? Nearly only another thing, put your headband on, Naruto said, as he changed his own headband and fixed it. Sasuke saw him prior to sneering and venturing into his weapon pocket. HMF, he said, as he attached the headband and utilized it to push his hair out of his face, uncovering his Rinnegan eye that was recently covered. Sakura in the interim just stayed there, grinning like a blockhead. This is additionally what it was really going after thought prior to changing her own temple defender and settling against a close-by tree to watch the match. Okay, both of you, Iruka shouted. I need a spotless battle. Recall this is only a well-disposed match. If it's not too much trouble, stay away from whatever would forever harm the field. No monster followed monster or Rinnegan assaults. Sakura is here to fix you up. However, don't go too far. I will call when the match is finished. Naruto and Sasuke didn't jump. Iruka murmured and had a spot resting up against a tree close to Sakura. At whatever point you are prepared, start. The environment on the preparation field moved quickly. The two companions locked their look, and the temperature climbed around them. A portion of the understudies communicated their shock when they could really feel the tension emanating from the opposite side of the field. Sakura and Iruka searched in wonderment, regardless of how frequently she saw them conflict. It never failed to stun her. As far as sheer crude power, there was no matching those two, and she inclined further against the tree and prepared herself for what was to come. Around the field, stones and little shakes started to shake and over in the air. The water in the lake changed from quiet to brutal, and the leaves in the trees started to whip fiercely. Neither one of the men seemed to try and notice as they kept on locking on to their rival. Then, at that point, as fast as it had begun, the uproar on the field halted. The stones settled down, and there was a short snapshot of all-out tranquility before Sasuke Uchiha took his action. His hands were excessively quick so that the undeveloped eye might be able to see. However, Sakura had the option to get him make a couple of hand seals at heartless speed. Here we go, she contemplated internally. Fiery blaze style. Extraordinary fireball justu, Sasuke yelled, and he inhaled out a Goliath ball for red shoot that was immediately covered in lines of dark flares and sent it flinging towards Naruto. The grass it left afterward was scorched to a soot, and it came inches away from hitting its objective. Without a second to spare, Naruto shot his hand out, and radiant yellow followed monster chakra covered it, appearing as a huge paw-like hand. The fireball banged into the chakra palm and murmured at it, attempted to forge ahead further without much of any result. Naruto shut his palm and as though it were nothing quenched the whole justu. Is that all you have? He yelled out prior to understanding his rival was at this point not before him. He checked out him rapidly prior to looking above, where he found Sasuke in the air with dark lighting transmitting from his hand. Onyx Chidori Senbon. He hollered as many little, dangerously sharp lighting needles shot out toward the ground. Naruto lacked the opportunity to respond as many Senbon pierced his arms and chest area. Sasuke arrived behind him and sliced with his sword, holding back nothing back, the cutting edge associated. Yet when it had the Naruto before him vanished into a puff of smoke across the field, Sakura let out a moan of help as she watched the harmed Naruto vanish. Sasuke glanced around attempting to find his rival. Not around, not above. Then he should be, but rather before he could complete his thinking the ground underneath him ejected as the genuine Naruto pummeled his clenched hand into Sasuke's jaw, thumping him back and up with a strong uppercut. The horde of understudies went wild as Naruto's blow associated. The vast majority of them hollered or cheered his name. However, a couple recoiled or supported Sasuke. Sakura was happy that the two figures were similarly as polarizing to the new age as they had been in the old. In the meantime, Sasuke had recaptured his balance. He cleared a little path of blood off his lip prior to broadening his forgot-about arm before him. His Rinnegan eye sparkled as he delivered his all-powerful push procedure. Naruto perceived the position and shaped an intimately acquainted hand seal. 12 clones indistinguishable from their maker showed up in a cone development behind Naruto. As Sasuke's join pushed him back, his clones pushed him forward. The power strengthened and clones started to vanish as they couldn't take the strain. Not long before the last 2 clones gave out, the power halted and a dust storm was left in the few yards Naruto had been pushed back. The youngsters cheered, and even Iruka let out a fast yell prior to acknowledging he should be fair in this battle. Sakura shot Iruka a knowing look and was glad she had figured out how to keep an emotionless expression. That, she thought, was great. Naruto's 2 excess clones vanished. Sasuke's window is 4 seconds before he can utilize his Rinnegan once more, 1 second quicker than Pain's assaults he suspected. He was as yet dazzled his opponent had figured out how to outperform the head of Akatsuki's speed with only 1 eye. He grinned to himself. I've been searching for a chance to give this a shot. With his left hand, he began to frame a bundle of chakra that dense and started turning at outrageous paces. Rasengan! One of the kids yelled out as a couple of more supported their number 1 ninja. He covered his other hand with his followed monster chakra mode and ventured into his weapon pocket. Instantly he tossed a chakra-covered kunai at Sasuke. To some other ninja, the speed of the assault would have demonstrated excessively, yet Sasuke essentially shifted his head as the weapon went going by. Another second, Sasuke thought as he lifted his arm to prepare another gravity assault. In any case, his eyes broadened when his companion vanished into a glimmer of orange and yellow before him. Sakura stood up from her inclining position, wide-looked at. Is that, however, before she could complete her thinking, she saw Naruto return behind Sasuke with perfect timing to get the kunai in his free hand. In one development he got the weapon and turned his body. His assault rammed into Sasuke's back, or it would have, on the off chance that the Uchiha had not shrouded himself in a ribcage made from chakra without a second to spare. Still, with the absence of time, Sasuke couldn't completely drive up his Susanoo, and the Rasengan sufficiently demonstrated to get through the chakra bone and send Sasuke flying forward a couple of feet. The group cheered and Naruto remained with his arm outstretched. A grin look stuck to his face. I can't accept he can utilize that just to now. Iruka verbally processed prior to going to Sakura. Did you realize he could do that? Sakura shook her head. It mooched her out a digit that her nearest friend had a strategy at his disposal that she had close to zero insight into. She immediately shook it off. In any case, that is only how Naruto was. He was overeager and capricious, and nobody could expect to stay aware of him consistently. As yet, watching the procedure in real life, she couldn't resist the opportunity to see the similarity among him and his dad, the 4th Hokage. I can't help thinking about what his father was like. She pondered, recalling when she had momentarily met him during the conflict. She was broken out of her viewpoints as she heard Iruka holler, "That is enough, both of you," prior to vanishing to the opposite side of the field. Sasuke looked disheartened. He wouldn't get an opportunity to fight back, yet comprehended this was only a match to energize the understudies and let out a moan prior to compromising of the field with Iruka. The two took a gander at one another and lifted their hand with 2 fingers broadened. Sakura swore she could cry seeing that. She started to stroll towards her group to actually look at the harm. Naruto was quick to see her and immediately approached to welcome her. He halted when he remained before her and peered down at her with a flicker in his eye. "How's that, Sakura-chan?" Sasuke couldn't in fact keep up any longer. He radiated from one ear to another prior to recoiling in torment when Sakura punched him in the arm. "Be unassuming," she chastised him. "Don't get a major head since you got a hit in. You know, whether you continued to go, the battle could not have possibly been finished." Naruto scowled and she let him sit in his wretchedness briefly prior to adding, "Still, I had no clue you could do that, and that was cool to watch. She chuckled as she watched his demeanor change back to that of a 7-year-old kid in no time. How long have you had the option to do that for? Naruto and Sakura went to see their third colleague stroll over and go along with them, scouring the piece of his back that Naruto had hit. About 7 days presently, it's not even close to dominated, and I can do it with one kunai in a brief distance. Yet it actually proves to be useful, Naruto answered. Sakura constrained herself not to give any indication of dissatisfaction. Just 7 days, that makes sense of why I had hardly any familiarity with it. Go converse with your fans, they're pausing, Sasuke said as he highlighted a gathering of kids that Irika was frantically attempting to monitor. Naruto let out a casual moan. He actually wasn't utilized to the more youthful age venerating him this much. Yet he didn't care about it. It really filled him with an extraordinary feeling of satisfaction. I simply have a couple of injuries on my arm, Sakura-chan. You can recuperate, Sasuke. First, I'll be right back, he said prior to going to go move the young people of Konoha. Sakura watched as he started giving an enthusiastic discourse to the understudies after he high-fived a couple of them. She then packed chakra into her hands as they sparkled a delicate green, and gradually the shine turned out to be all the more remarkable. She motioned toward Sasuke to pivot, and he gestured and lifted up the rear of his shirt. Sakura put her hands on the dim injury that was shaping where Naruto had handled his assault. Sasuke took a full breath as the torment disappeared. All in all, how has it been since you got back? I've just seen you a couple of times, Sakura expressed, attempting to end the abnormal quietness as her hands laid on his back. Sasuke held up a second, making her inquiry in the event that he was in any event going to answer before he spoke. It's been okay. Not every person has been essentially as excusing as you and Naruto have, yet that will be normal. I need to procure my place here now. He stopped and glanced over to Naruto, who was hindering punches as a couple of little shinobi in preparing endeavored to land a hit. However, it's serene. He got done. Sakura eliminated her hand and Sasuke corrected his shirt. Indeed, I'm happy you're back. We as a whole are, and the individuals who aren't will come around in the end, she expressed matter-of-verifiably. In addition to having that nitwit around all the time should help a little, she gestured at their blonde colleague. Sasuke glanced back at her confounded. Really, I haven't seen a lot of him since I returned. We have fought one time before this, and he assisted me with moving some stuff into where I'm remaining. Yet other than that, I expected he was with you. He saw as Sakura's eyes obscured a little, and she checked the ground. Gracious was all she could say. The dim-haired shinobi murmured and thought back over to his dearest companion and last family. Blockhead, what in blazes are you doing? He contemplated internally. He likewise pondered whether to express something to comfort Sakura, yet acknowledged whatever he might specify would presumably just make things work. Encouraging individuals was not one of his assets. He moaned as stood up. I need to meet with Kakashi. He needs to discuss potentially sending me on missions. I'll see you around. Gratitude for that. He motioned to his physical issue, and before Sakura could answer, he vanished suddenly. Sakura watched where he had been standing under a second prior and laughed. For Sasuke, that was really chatty. I believe being home will be great for him, she thought prior to flinching at the other point he had made. Yet on the off chance that Naruto isn't with him, for what reason is he disregarding me? As though on signal, the blonde being referred to showed up before her and grinned out. Sorry for the standby, Sakura-chan, those children as vivacious as me. He scoured the rear of his head and investigated one final time as Irika waved, saying thanks to the two of them again prior to driving his class out of the preparation field. Naruto centered back to her. Where could the other one be? Try not to let me know he left, Sakura answered. Yeah, said he needed to get together with Kakashi. Something about him getting enlisted to go on missions once more. Presently keep actually let me see your arm, he didn't move. Sakura, you truly don't have tea. She hindered him by pulling him forward by the arm being referred to. So powerfully he staggered a stage prior to recapturing his balance. How am I going to manage you, nitwit? She said prior to moving at his disposal. Her eyes shot open when she saw consumed blemishes on his arm. Nothing insane, yet more than she was anticipating. I suppose you're not so strong as you suspect, she said prior to beginning to deal with his arm. He threw and allow her to recuperate him. I surmise not. They sat in agreeable quietness as Sakura wrapped up recuperating his injury. When she was finished, she took out a gauze from her weapon pocket and wrapped the consume. That ought to get it done. Just put some balm on it this evening. I'm certain I have left some at your place. She grinned at him and he grinned right back. She thought briefly prior to inquiring. I'm really eager, want to snatch lunch? My treat. She watched the blondie got energized before his face broke into a grimace. Ah man, I need to Sakura-chan yet I failed to remember Kanahamaru has something to show me. He said it was earnest. He scoured the rear of his head once more. Sakura turned away briefly to recover. It's fine, perhaps tomorrow. I feel like I haven't seen you by any stretch of the imagination since Sasuke got back. At the notice of his name, Naruto got perceptibly awkward. Yeah, certain things, Sakura-chan. 6 see you tomorrow. Gratitude for setting me up. He gave her one final smile prior to vanishing into the trees driving back to the town. Sakura just remained there, presently totally alone in the preparation grounds, befuddled and hurt. She had not just figured out her closest companion had been overlooking her. However, he had done it once more and passed her over. She needed to punch him, yet additionally needed to simply shout. What was considerably more confounding was the response he was escaping her. Get a hold of yourself, he doesn't owe you anything, she said without holding back, as she started her stroll back to the town. Just a single idea filled her psyche. Naruto, what is the deal with you? Naruto arrived on the highest point of a roof close to the entry of the town. He was perspiring and exhausted. He hadn't quit moving since he left the preparation field. He hammered his clenched hand into a close-by wall and rested on it for help while gripping his chest with his other hand. Gradually, his breathing steadied as he constrained himself to take a few profound inhales. He peered down at the ground and let out a long murmur. Damn it, he thought. For what reason does this need to be so difficult? For what reason might I at any point let it proceed to continue on? For what reason does this need to hurt so a lot? He pivoted and rested up against the wall as he gradually slid down and laid his elbows kneeling down. He gazed toward the sky and couldn't prevent a little tear from framing at the edge of his eye. He recalled quite a while back, just after the conflict finished. He recollected the inclination in his chest when Sakura Haruno had requested to join Sasuke Uchiha on his journey for recovery. The sensation of his shocking into was not something that he would ever neglect. On that day, the cruel reality hit him. He understood that Sakura actually cherished their other colleague, and, surprisingly, after all that had happened, her sentiments hadn't faltered. He realized it was credulous to trust in any case, yet seeing it in person was significantly seriously pulverizing that he might have envisioned on that day. Naruto had chosen to cover all sentiments he had for his pink-haired partner, on the off chance that she could be blissful, even in the arms of another man. Then he would move to one side and do whatever it takes not to meddle on that day. He had avoided Sakura Haruno, or on the other hand, so he thought, yet even he would never have anticipated how close both of them would become soon after the conflict. Truth be told, he didn't even expertise it worked out. First and foremost, he simply thought she was being cordial or being his partner. As time continued, however, he understood that their bond was developing considerably further than it had been previously. She had turned into his comrade and his dearest companion. He reviewed every one of the recollections that they had made throughout the course of recent years, every one of the punches he had gotten over moronic remarks. In all honesty, he had figured out how to like her semi-normal beatings. It advised him that he wasn't imperceptible and furthermore held his knucklehead side in line, moderately speaking, and gradually the wall he had worked after the conflict begun to fall. He felt that having her next to him in any way was better compared to not. He felt that being her companion would be sufficient. Once more, he was being guileless. The most recent 14 days had been a portion of the most horrendously terrible in his life, and that was saying something thinking about his experience growing up, when his previous teacher had educated him and Sakura regarding Sasuke's unavoidable return. He felt the delight of the most recent 2 years sucked away in a moment. He realized that once his opponent returned, then, at that point, that would be it. It would just involve time before Sasuke and Sakura got together, and afterward she wouldn't require him any longer. In that frame of mind of his psyche, he realized that this day would come. It didn't make really going through it any simpler. That evening he had sobbed late into the night. He came to the choice once more to move to one side for her joy. He had utilized any reason to keep away from her since that day. He had offered them more than adequate chance to seek after each other. He had done everything directly as he would see it, so what shocked him the most was that nothing had occurred. In spite of popular conviction, Naruto was not genuinely hindered. Sure, as a youngster his brain had been high contrast, yet subsequent to going with Jiraiya and going through all that he has with his kindred ninja, he had really become very great at getting on unobtrusive, profound hints. So when he saw Sakura and Sasuke cooperate at the preparation field prior that day, it had stunned him that it was clear nothing had occurred among them. That being said, it didn't prevent him from feeling squashed as he kept an eye out, even to recuperate him. He simply didn't grasp it, couldn't comprehend it. They had battled for such a long time. He had battled for such a long time to bring Sasuke back. And now that Sakura was going about as though nothing had changed, and afterward there was the look she had given him when he attempted once more to give her space today. It was a look he had never seen on her. She looked completely dismissed. It was exclusively briefly before she concealed it and switched up the conversation. However he had seen it unmistakable. It had simply confounded him more. On top of everything, he was currently worried about being an unfortunate companion to her. At this point, notwithstanding this, he was unable to force himself to be distant from everyone else with her. He was apprehensive her organization would be a lot to bear, and he could say something he would lament later. He realized he was unable to overlook her eternity. He would have rather not disregarded her by any stretch of the imagination, yet he was so lost. He took a couple of all the more profound inhales before at last standing. He was broken out of his viewpoints when he heard a recognizable voice shouting to him, "Yet again there you are, Chief. I have been searching wherever for you," Konohamaru said as he arrived on the rooftop before Naruto. "You remembered we should meet, did you?" "Sorry, youngster. I just got somewhat occupied," Naruto answered. Konohamaru could see something was off. "Hello, Naruto, are you okay?" he asked his blonde companion. Naruto shook his head and smiled at the kid. "I'm fine. Simply some stuff at the forefront of my thoughts. Not a problem," he answered. Konohamaru could see he was lying, yet chose not to push the subject and on second thought change it. "It's great overall, come on. I have something I think you're going to need to see." And with that, he hopped down to the road level underneath and waved for Naruto to follow him. Naruto gazed toward the sky and took a profound inhale. "No utilization stirring myself up. I will sort it out ultimately." And with that, he joined his companion as they strolled toward any place Konohamaru was taking them. Naruto followed Konohamaru through the bustling roads of the town. As they strolled, he was welcomed by many grins and waves from his kindred residents. He was even come by certain youngsters who requested his signature, which he happily gave them. Konohamaru remained there with a sneer all over. He was unquestionably cheerful, and furthermore a peace desirous that his opponent and companion had become such a superstar. Naruto never got a major head. He grinned and waved back at the residents that accepted everything. It had been a long time since he had in a real sense saved the world, and keeping in mind that it had required some investment, he was currently changed in accordance with how he was dealt with. Generally, he truly loved it. It was the perfect inverse of how he was treated as a kid. Yet he didn't hold on to an ounce of hatred, all things considered. He partook in the way that he had gained the appreciation of each and every individual who recognized him. This isn't to imply that the consistent consideration wasn't in some cases burdening, particularly his recently discovered prominence with the other gender, the quantity of gifts, bare photographs, and absolutely propositions to be engaged he got consistently would do right by his lord. In contrast to his lord nonetheless, Naruto gave a valiant effort to disregard this sort of consideration. He wasn't in that frame of mind to contemplate any young lady other than the one that occupied a large portion of his time, and he was sure that regardless of whether he were to at any point date, it wouldn't be a regular citizen lady who couldn't basically attempt to stay aware of him and his way of life. The two shadow clone clients advanced toward a little wooden structure that was on the edges of the town. Right under Hokage Landmark, Konohamaru removed a key from his pocket and opened the entryway. He turned on the light and the old bulbs made a weak humming clamor at the items in the construction were uncovered. The walls were fixed with heaps of boxes, all filled and marked as they stretched out as far as possible up to the roof of the structure. "Hello, kid, where are we?" Naruto asked as he glanced around and took in his environmental factors. "This is the Sarutobi Group storage space. It's not a lot yet. My family utilizes this spot to keep things we don't require around the house. I think our family ancestry is covered in here someplace as well." Konohamaru highlighted a particular box heap that was named Sarutobi History, as though to make his statement. "I was scanning around here without precedent for a long time a few days ago, and I found something that has a place with you." He went on prior to moving further into the labyrinth of boxes. "Me?" Naruto asked in disarray as he followed his young companion, and halted when Konohamaru took out two medium-sized boxes and put them on the floor before them. "There are two things here. It appears as though one of them my granddad set to the side for you. I didn't open it, yet all the same it's marked adolescence, so I'm accepting at least for now that it's old stuff he believed you should have." Naruto's mouth opened somewhat yet before he could answer. Konohamaru forged ahead. "The other one, Naruto. The other one is from your folks." Naruto's eyes augmented and he promptly got the crate and perused the name on the container. It read things for Naruto, Minato/Kushina. His eyes started to water as he gazed at the case in wonderment. "This has been here the entire time," he shared with himself more than anybody. "Please accept my apologies, Chief. You realize I would have given it to you sooner, assuming that I had known. However, I just tracked down it by some coincidence," Konohamaru said remorsefully. Naruto could perceive he was earnestly stressed he was to blame. "It's okay, youngster. I have it well. That matters, indeed. Since you're here, want to assist me with opening this stuff?" Konohamaru's state of mind in a split second moved as he plunked down on the floor just to be joined by Naruto not long after. Naruto chose to initially open the crate the third has left for him. He took a kunai out from his pocket and painstakingly cut the tape that fixed the highest point of the case. He opened the top, peered down, and grinned. He was welcome to seeing different keepsakes from his life as a youngster as far as possible up to the time the third Hokage has passed. He connected and eliminated the things individually. First, he took out his old orange and blue coat. He saw every one of the openings and soil on it, and he was reminded exactly the amount he had prepared in that outfit. It was ideal to have an update that all the difficult work wasn't a figment of his imagination. He collapsed the coat flawlessly and put it close to him. Konohamaru looked as Naruto went through the things individually. His old goggles he would wear before he graduated the foundation, his authority genin photograph, a corroded shuriken that he perceived as one of his first, his old dozing cap, and a lapsed voucher for 10 free feasts at Ikaraku's, to which Naruto was very amped up for until he read the fine print. When he was done, Naruto painstakingly positioned the things back into the case and shut it. After a second he checked Konohamaru out. "Much thanks to you for this," he said, his demeanor horrendously serious. "It's a distinction to think your granddad thought often this much about me. I truly didn't realize that he did." Naruto thought down at the case. He had consistently asked why, on the off chance that the third had some significant awareness of his legacy. He didn't accomplish other things to help him. He currently understood that the old Hokage had done all that he could while saving the harmony in the town, and he was profoundly appreciative to realize the man had invested as much energy as he had contemplating him, regardless of whether he was unable to accomplish more. "No issue, Chief. You want to open the other one or bring it back home?" Naruto thought briefly prior to thinking back to his companion. "Never a better time than right now, right?" He grinned and grabbed hold of the leftover box. He was apprehensive to open it, yet he steadied his determination and gradually cut the tape and lifted the top. He panted as he peered inside to see the items. The simple sight of things that were his folks brought out feelings he hadn't anticipated. The crate had 4 things within it. Naruto took out the first one and held it in quite a while hand. It was an edge that was isolated into 3 segments, 2 more modest ones of the top half, and 1 bigger one on the base half. On the upper left was a photograph of his dad as a genin, and on the right was a matching photograph of his mom. Naruto had never seen an image of his folks so youthful. He was unable to accept how the same he and his dad had looked as youngsters. He thought back over to his mom and a mixed inclination struck his chest. "She helps me such a huge amount to remember her," he thought as his brain meandered to his pink-haired companion. He immediately constrained himself to zero in on the blissful job needing to be done and focused on the base portion of the casing. It was a photograph of his dad embracing his mom from behind, while she held her hands on her exceptionally pregnant stomach. The edges of Naruto's mouth bended somewhat as a tear tumbled from his eye onto his mom's shoulder. "We at last have an image together." He cleaned his eyes and apologized to his companion, who dismissed it and motioned for him to proceed. The following thing he pulled out was one of his dad's popular Thunder God kunai blades. He was shocked to feel exactly the way in which weighty the weapon was, as this was his most memorable time holding it outside his followed monster structure. Under the kunai was a parchment. Naruto unwound his and perused the initial not many lines eagerly as his eyes shot open. "What is it?" Konohamaru said, excessively invigorated to his benefit. Naruto shut the parchment. "It's guidelines on the most proficient method to dominate my dad's procedure. From its vibes, it's amazingly exhaustive and fills in every one of the holes I've been having while at the same time attempting to learn it myself," Naruto answered. "This is unimaginable." He twirled the kunai around his finger prior to putting it close to the parchment and photo placement. "Much appreciated, Father." He ventured into the crate and panted as he took out the last thing. In his grasp, he held a blue-green scarf, with white vertical stripes separating the example each couple of inches. He opened up the scarf and saw that his was obviously hand-sewn, yet extraordinarily very much made. As he moved it, a little Polaroid photograph exited and he got it before it hit the ground. It was in much more regrettable condition than the outlined photograph he had seen before, yet what he saw carried another round of tears to his eyes. His mom was sitting in a seat in what he accepted for the time being that was their home, sewing the scarf he as of now grasped. On the rear of the photograph there were 3 transcribed words: "Cheerful birthday, Naruto." That did it, the blend of realizing he was grasping something his mom made, with the way that it was made only for him, was sufficient to push him over. He held his arm over his eyes as a large number of tears began to stream down. Konohamaru looked as his legend and dear companion separated before him. He was going to say something when he had a thought. He got up, gradually took the scarf from his hands, and folded it over Naruto's neck. Naruto jumped at the contact and, after acknowledging what his companion had done, grinned toward him. "They truly adored you, Chief," Konohamaru said as he congratulated Naruto. Naruto took an full breath and let out the words, "Yeah, they truly did." Before the tears returned, Naruto and Konohamaru forgot about time as they remained there, not letting out the slightest peep. At last, the 2-leaf ninja went out, Naruto conveying his freshly discovered treasures with his companion following not far behind. "Thanks, kid. You have no clue about how much this all means to me." Konohamaru slapped his guide on the back and smiled. I'm simply returning what's yours. The blondie was genuinely contacted before he seen how low the sun was overhead. Poop. I should meet with Kakashi teacher. He said it was significant. Presumably another mission. Gracious man. I can't be late once more. He immediately shaped his unmistakable hand sign and a solitary shadow clone showed up close to him. He gave the case to his clone, yet not prior to taking his new scarf and folding it over his neck. You lose this, you're dead in any event. For a clone, a globule of sweat framed on the clone's temple as he gestured prior to vanishing toward Naruto's home. Naruto thanks his companion once more and went to leave. Hello, Chief. Konomaru yelled out and Naruto pivoted. Best of luck with whatever is irritating you. Naruto was shocked yet shot his companion approval prior to bouncing on the housetops and heading for Hokage Pinnacle. Sakura turned the way into her condo and immediately shut the entryway behind her. It had started snowing partially through her shift and she was not well ready without a doubt. She had figured out how to keep away from the vast majority of the nasty weather conditions by dodging from one cover to another, yet for the last leg of her process home, she couldn't stay away from the snow and was presently significantly cold and wet. She removed her shoes and headed towards the restroom, yet not before she saw Ino and Sai nestled up on the sofa. "Hi, Sakura," Sai said, being the first of the pair to see her. Ino went to see her closest companion and grinned. "Drawn-out day?" she inquired. "You have no clue," she answered prior to heading into the washroom. Ino and Sai shared a thoughtful glance at one another prior to getting back to their past exercises. Sakura rose up out of the restroom a couple of moments later, her hair wet and slicked back and a lime green towel around her chest. She glanced over to the love seat and saw it was vacant. She then, at that point, heard Ino groan as a boisterous squeaking commotion came from her opponent's room. She murmured and a vein popped in her brow. "Jesus pig, I'm cheerful you all are together now, yet it would be good to not need to return home to each night," she pondered internally as she went into her room. She took out a couple of pink running pants and a larger than usual white shirt, and sluggishly tumbled down onto her bed. She cherished Sai, and it was really her that proposed he take action on Ino. She had seen he acted somewhat diversely around her after they had returned from a mission together, and it turned out her sense had been right. The two had been dating for a very long time at this point, and she could never have imagined how close the pair would become. She likewise didn't feel that they would be this physically dynamic. Knowing Sai, she had expected it would take Ino a short time to show him fundamental closeness, let alone for them to go as far as possible. All things being equal, she had figured out Ino had broken the unfortunate kid in about 14 days' time, and presently she was blessed to receive a wonderful confidential show of her closest companion getting pleasured on a close daily premise. It should be ideal to be really focused on like that, she thought, before her psyche quickly shot to her blonde colleague. She shook her head to move the considerations to disappear. "What's going on with you? He disregards you for a couple of days and presently you can't get him somewhere far away from me." Sadly for her, she had spent the better piece of her shift attempting to sort out why she was being overlooked. Late night of pondering, she wasn't ready to concoct a solitary explanation. The main thought that jumped into her head was, as whimsical as it sounded, that he as of now not had any desire to be her companion. In any case, she quickly drove that thought away. She realized it wasn't accurate, and she additionally didn't have any desire to ponder him not being around her thus. She moaned and got a clinical parchment she had been perusing from her end table to divert herself. She had possibly been perusing for 5 minutes when she heard an incensed thumping at her front entryway. I'm coming," she shouted as the thumping proceeds. She put down her parchment and advanced toward the wellspring of the disturbance. She saw Ino's entryway was as yet closed, and took a full breath prior to opening the entryway. Her heart skirted a thump when she saw Naruto remaining there, his arms kneeling down and twisted around as he was attempting to pause and rest. She saw he was wearing a green scarf that she had never seen. "Naruto? What are you doing here? Is everything okay, Sakura-chan? He hindered as he stood upright and gave her perhaps of the greatest smile that she had at any point found in her life. Sakura-chan, I will be Hokage. Sakura-chan, I will be Hokage. Sakura flickered multiple times as she began her blonde companion's cerulean eyes. She was glad to see him, and simultaneously irritated that he picked late around evening time after one of her long moves to do pop in. Her brand name vein shows up on her sanctuary, and she shut her eyes in dissatisfaction. Naruto, we as a whole realize you will be Hokage one day. You don't have to bang my entryway down to let me know that once more. Naruto didn't look away from her, and his demeanor turned unbelievably troublesome. It definitely stood out, and she really wanted to see the little butterflies that shuddered in her chest. No, Sakura-chan, I will be the Hokage, as in formally similar to the following one. I just met Kakashi Master and he gave me the news. It was settled on last week, yet I just found out. He looked as her eyes enlarged and the cogwheels started to turn in her mind. She took a little sharp breath prior to putting on the hottest grin Naruto had at any point seen her give him. It made his day on the spot. Naruto! She yelled in sheer energy. Before she understood what she was doing, she bounced onto her blonde companion. Folding her arms over his neck, the power was sufficient to knock them both off their feet. Naruto arrived on his back with Sakura on top of him. Riding him with her arms actually locked around him, it just required a couple of moments for the two of them to understand the position they were in. Sakura was on top of him. Their countenances simply inches separated. The butterflies in her stomach detonated. Both shinobi become flushed a dull shade of red, and Sakura immediately got off of him. She shook the snow off her jeans and attempted to get it together decently well. Good gracious, please accept my apologies, she said as she offered her hand to help Naruto up. He just laid there. His psyche seared at the unexpected closeness he had imparted to her before he too forgot about it and acknowledged her hand. No problem. Sakura couldn't quit smiling his direction as she yelled once more. You will be Ho. Abruptly of orange and yellow, Naruto immediately positioned his hand over her mouth as she shouted into his palm. She froze and his eyes shot open at the unexpected contact. As of now, they had been actually nearer than she at any point recollected that them being. He pulled away when she completed the process of making sound. Sorry, Sakura-chan. It's actually characterized and nobody should be aware. He pointed a finger towards Ino's room, and his thought process was a shrewd way. I shouldn't tell anybody yet, but his voice followed off as though he was suspecting to speak. My body just dominated and I came here. You were the main individual I needed to tell. Sakura mouthed a quiet, gracious prior to turning her head towards Ino's room. She realized that it was basically impossible that in damnation the pig would hear anything as she was very distracted. Yet concluded Naruto didn't have to know that. All things being equal, she turned around to him. Allow me 5 minutes, we're taking a walk. Naruto was going to tell her they didn't need to before she shut the entryway right in front of him, leaving him no decision except for to sit tight for her. While he paused, he contacted the rear of his neck. He may as yet feel where she had folded her arms over him. She's never done that. He thought as a become flushed covered his face. He credited it to her being energized and chosen to let it go. Following a couple of moments of holding up, Sakura reappeared in her typical clothing and her red coat and winter boots. She looked cute, he thought, before Sakura ventured outside and locked the entryway behind her. Thus, where do you want to go? He asked. She shrugged and passed him as she advanced toward the road. We should simply see where the breeze takes us. She went to confront him and he laughed prior to joining her next to her. The pair started to walk north from Sakura's loft. It had gotten colder since Sakura returned home. Yet the snow had eased up a little. What was initially a strong tempest had transformed into a pleasant light shower of white. The street lamps considered the falling chips as the two ninjas strolled in agreeable quietness for a couple of blocks. Sakura investigated at the blonde kid close to her. She realized he was holding on until they tracked down a tranquil spot to stop prior to sharing every one of the subtleties of his Hokage arrangement. However, that didn't mean she was unable to converse with her companion. "Hey Naruto, I've never apparent you abrasion that before." She nodded to his new scarf. "It sweets you." Naruto beamed in her administration as he cautiously effected the bolt with his unbandaged hand. "It was my mom's Sakura-chan." Sakura chock full walking and looked at him. "Wait, wah?" Naruto answered before she had time to finish. "Kanomaru begin a box of actuality that my parents larbored for me. It was declared to be for a back I was built in, I guess. But he aloof begin it today. There was some actually absurd actuality in there." She advised her acquaintance as he connected on to acquaint her the capacity of the box, as able-bodied as of the box larboard to him by the third Hokage. "I can't accept that had been there all this time. Well, I'm blessed it assuredly surfaced." She looked abroad from him and said a little quieter than she meant to. "Plus, you attending acceptable in it." The acclaim took Naruto off guard, but afterwards a moment he smiled for the umpteenth time that night. "Thanks, Sakura-chan. It's nice to accept an absolute allowance from my parents." Anticipation beyond his apperception as he should acknowledgement the compliment. "You look nice too," he said a four-axis abroad from her, so she couldn't see his facial expression. Sakura in about face followed his advance to attending away. "Idiot," she said below her animation as she smiled. But he winced a bit aback. He heard it. "They connected to airing in blackout until they begin themselves in advance of Hokage Mansion." Sakura smirked at Naruto. "This clandestine enough?" she asked as she absolved to the accessible breadth appropriate alfresco the Ninja Academy allocation of the building. She hadn't meant annihilation by her words, but they were abundant to ample Naruto's arch with a brace altered scenarios. He would rather she be allurement him that catechism in. Regardless, he followed her lead. "This actually takes me back," Sakura said as they entered the courtyard of the Ninja Academy. Naruto absolved abaft her and looked around. Activity abundantly nostalgic. The old academy had been destroyed in Pain's advance on the village, but because it was absorbed to Hokage Mansion, the new one congenital in its abode was about identical. He noticed a distinct swing, dark by two pieces of braiding from an adjacent tree. It was his swing, and the abandoned affair to miraculously survive the decimation. He remembered all the ache he had to abide on that swing, watching his classmates comedy and accomplish a company while he was abandoned and ignored. None of that mattered now, he thought. He was burst out of his anticipation aback. His bloom-haired accompaniment brushed off the exhausted in catechism and sat down. She began to amplitude gently, and aback she fabricated eye acquaintance with him, his animation bent in his throat. "Okay, spill." He beginner abode beside her and put his easily in his pockets. He didn't like talking about his achievements, alike if this one was the bigger one of his activity to date. "Well, afterwards the kid gave me the adeptness from my parents. I met up with Kakashi-sensei. He had mentioned he had article important to allocution to me about. But I aloof affected his was addition mission, but aback I absolved into his arrangement. He was there, and so was Bachan and Shizune and Shikamaru and the Apple Elders." Sakura nodded her arch as she attentively listened to apprehend him. "I was abashed at first, but Kakashi told me to sit down. He told me that it had been in the works for a while, but as of today I was acutely accustomed as the seventh Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village." He smiled sheepishly bottomward at her and rubbed the back of his head. "But it's far from happening. I still accept to adeptness Jounin rank, which will apparently booty edition year. A fresh I accept to alternation below Kakashi-sensei for at atomic a few months, apparently longer. But the old man isn't actually aggravating to authority onto the position, so aback he retires in the abutting few years. A fresh it's my turn." Sakura aloof stared at the face of the boy she had accepted best of her life. An arrival of affections ran through her anatomy all at the aforementioned time. This man had fought so adamantine for aggregate that he had achieved, and assuredly his bigger dream was advancing true. She approved to say article but couldn't do annihilation but attending at him. Article in her was screaming. but she didn't apperceive what it was or what it capital her to do. So she aloof kept attractive at him. Naruto on the added Duke looked back, a little anxious for his now aphasiac teammate. He was about to breach the blackout. Aback Sakura got up from the exhausted and connected her Duke out in the best academic address she could. "Congratulations, aristocrat Hokage," she said as she cautiously smiled at her best friend. Naruto looked bottomward at her, as his affections approved to get the bigger of him. He capital annihilation added than to be with her, alone, like this, for all of time. He took her Duke and captivated it as bound as he could. "Thank you actual much, adult Sakura." To his surprise, she didn't let go. She aloof kept attractive into his eyes. He could feel his affection amount acceleration up as his aperture aback dry out. "I'm so abundantly appreciative of you, Naruto," she assuredly managed to get out. Her affection was assault aloof as fast as his. "Nobody deserves this added than you do." She was about to let go. Aback article central her absentatively she wasn't accessible for the acquaintance to be over. So instead, she abject him with her as she sat aback bottomward on the swing. He asked her what she was accomplishing as he landed abaft her. Communicable his balance, Sakura didn't apperceive what had appeared over her, but she wasn't in ascendancy over her accomplishments anymore. So she did the aboriginal affair that came to mind. Your aboriginal act of account to the accessible is to advance this abandoned kunoichi on this swing. She gave him a beam and wiggled her eyebrows afore she affronted abroad from him. It was an acceptable affair too, because contrarily she would accept apparent his jaw drop. He wasn't acclimated to Sakura actuality this playful, he thought. He couldn't admonition but appetite to see added of it. He did what he was asked and cautiously placed his award on her back. He had to stop himself from animation abundant aback. He acquainted her attenuate anatomy in his hands. He acclaimed pushed and watched as she swung up an appropriate aback bottomward into his palm. "I apperceive you can do bigger than that," she teased. Not actuality one to aback bottomward from a challenge. Naruto pushed her decidedly harder and watched as she swung fast several all-overs in the air. She laughed and Naruto swore he could die happy. He had aloof been told he was accomplishing his constant dream, but he was abashed this adeptness be the best allotment of his day. Sakura let Naruto advance her for a few added minutes, or maybe it was a few added hours if she was actuality honest. She had actually absent clue of time. Aback he gave her an added adamantine advance. She jumped off the exhausted as it able its able point, and landed alluringly on the arena a few all-overs away. She affronted to face him and grinned afore walking in his direction. "Your turn." Naruto froze and abhorred her gaze. She best up on the attenuate change and connected to airing adjoin him. "Naruto, is aggregate okay?" "Everything is able, Sakura-chan." He assuredly looked aback at her. "It's aloof that, well, no one's any time pushed me on exhausted before." He let out an awkward beam aback. He saw Sakura's eyes widen. She was in shock. She knew he had an asperous childhood, but she sometimes forgot aloof how bad he had it. Just how abundant did he accept to endure? She anticipation afore attractive aback at him and motioning for him to sit. She absolved abaft him and put her easily on his high back. The collywobbles in her abdomen returned, abundant to her dismay. Aback she acquainted the adamantine anatomy of his amateur adjoin her palm. "Relax, this is Naruto, it's aloof Naruto." He affronted aback at her and grinned his signature grin, and she anon acquainted at ease. She pushed her acquaintance and watched as joy abounding his eyes aback he swung up and aback down. He let out an abysmal laugh and she smiled at his reaction. It was nice to apperceive alike admitting he had afflicted so much. The hyperactive adolescent was still ambuscade below the surface. She absentatively to up the bold a bit and focused chakra into her hands. The abutting advance beatific him aerial as his eyes opened wide. The exhausted went aerial through the air, and Naruto absent his anchor on it as the top. He was beatific aerobatics into the alpha snow a few all-overs abroad from her, and landed burst on his face. The snow was abysmal abundant that his arch and abutting were abysmal entirely, and the angel fabricated Sakura babble like a madman. Naruto removed himself from the snow and befuddled his arch in adjustment to get the actual aqueous off his hair. He saw Sakura wiping a breach from her eye and he abutting in her laughter. The two stood there, bedlam hysterically, until eventually they managed to calm down, blackout abounding the air, and Naruto best up on a restriction that hadn't been there before. "Naruto," he heard her ask softly, as if the words she were about to say would breach her. "Why except you been blank me?" Time stood still for him, as the joy from the aftermost hour was replaced by agitation and guilt. He didn't beggarly to lie to her, but the words came out afore he could stop himself. "Sakura-chan, what are you talking about? I haven't been blank you. I've aloof been so active the aftermost few weeks what with allowance Sasuke move aback and get settled. Additional my missions, and I had to apple pie my abode so that took best than I thou." "Naruto, don't lie to me," she cut him off. "I already talked to Sasuke-ku, I already talked to Sasuke, and he told me you two had about spent any time together. He affected you were with me, and aback I saw you at the hospital aftermost anniversary you acted like I didn't exist." She paused and looked at the arena as her award effective the basal of her coat. "If I did article amiss aloof acquaint me so I can apologize." "No!" The accent and aggregate of Naruto's articulation abashed her, and she looked up to see him attractive at her with an acute focus she rarely saw aback he wasn't on the battlefield. He took a few accomplish after-piece to her, until he was appropriate in advance of her attractive down. "Sakura-chan, I am actually sorry. The accuracy is I was alienated you. You didn't do annihilation wrong. It's just," he looked abroad and she saw the assurance in his eyes about face to weakness and vulnerability. "It's aloof I was aggravating to accord you and Sasuke space. I anticipation now that he's aback you two would, appetite time to yourselves. I didn't appetite to get in the way." His fists clenched at his ancillary and he connected to abstain her gaze. Sakura was stunned. It had never occurred to her that he could be alienated her for such an affectionate reason. It additionally never occurred to her that she had never talked to her best acquaintance about area she stood with their third teammate. She stood bashful for a moment. What would he anticipate if he knew she was over the man they had spent the bigger allotment of their ninja careers pursuing? Regardless, she had to get it out now. This was Naruto, for bigger or worse, he wouldn't authority or animosity adjoin her. "Naruto, sit." She allowable, and he appeared startled. Afore afterward her adjustment and switching spots with her to sit a back bottom ward on the swing. "I charge to acquaint you something, and I'm apologetic I didn't acquaint you sooner, but you should know." She took a abysmal animation and steadied her resolve. "There isn't annihilation amid Sasuke and I. He was my aboriginal love, and I still exceed him a adored comrade. But afterwards aggregate we went through to accompany him back. I am not able of actuality with him, alike if he capital too, which, by the way, he actual acutely does not." Sakura acquainted hidden affections bubbles to apparent as she had never actually said the abutting allotment out loud. "I saw how abundant he aching people, how accommodating he was to aching me, and how able he was of affliction you. I apperceive that isn't who he is, and I accept forgiven him for all those things, but—" She paused and looked into Naruto's ocean dejected eyes again. "I able he isn't the man for me." When she was able she took a footfall back and wiped abroad a breach she didn't apprehend was falling from her eye. "I'm apologetic I fabricated you backpack the weight of bringing him home aloof for me, but I'm aloof not as able as you. I can't aloof pretend things are the aforementioned and I can't be with addition I don't adulation anymore. I am so sorry." By the time she was able tears were advisedly falling bottomward her cheek. Naruto sat on the swing. A actor altered affections and thoughts were active through his mind. He couldn't stop the river of questions flowing. She doesn't adulation him anymore? How can that be? We formed so adamantine for so long. How can she casting aggregate abreast aloof like that? Wait, why am I angry? I shouldn't be angry. This is great. This is the best account I accept heard all day. Able-bodied besides acceptable Hokage and everything. No, calm bottom ward Naruto. Aloof because she doesn't adulation him doesn't beggarly she can adulation you. Don't let your apperception go there, it will abandon be added painful. But oh my god it. His mile a minute thought action was disconnected aback. He saw she was crying. As if on instinct. He stood up from his exhausted and acclimated his deride to clean abroad one of her tears. Sakura froze aback, she acquainted the contact. And looked up to not anger, but affliction and affair in his dejected eyes. Don't cry Sakura-chan, amused don't cry, it's okay. I didn't apperceive you acquainted that way. I'm so apologetic I abandoned you. I should accept aloof talk to you like an adult. But I'm an idiot, remember? He smiled bottom ward and the pinkette couldn't admonition but laugh. You're not mad? She asked, regaining some of her composure. I'll accept I'm surprised. But no, I'm not mad. He smiled bottom ward at her. If anything, I'm relieved. I actually didn't appetite to accept a pink-haired Uchiha active about the apple for the blow of my life. She laughed and wiped some added tears from her eyes afore he continued. Besides, I didn't aloof accompany him aback for you. You apperceive that. He's my brother. I wasn't planning on absolution him go that easy. She knew it was true, but audition it from his aperture she acquainted a beachcomber of abatement ablution over her. This man could acquisition the ablaze ancillary of any situation, despite how abutting he was at times. Appropriate now he had said actually what she bare to hear. She begin herself at a accident for words for what acquainted like the 100th time that night. So she said nothing, instead, she connected to beam abysmal into Naruto's. They were accepting a conversation, but neither knew what they bare to say. All they did apperceive was they didn't appetite to attending away. Sakura was about to say something, but a loud acute articulation aback screamed central her head. Sakura Haruno, where the hell are you? Are you okay? I've been worried sick. Sakura flinched, put her easily on her temples as she heard her albino acquaintance and battling agreeable in her arch with her apperception transfer jutsu. She affronted her arch aback to a abashed Naruto who artsy his arch and looked at her. Sorry Naruto, that's Ino, it's accepting late, and the snow is acrimonious up again. I should apparently get home. She said afore internally agreeable at Ino that she would be aback soon. Right? No botheration Sakura-chan. Thanks for absolution me arrest your night, he said sheepishly and rubbed the aback of his neck. Sakura smiled and gave him a bendable chaw on the shoulder. Congratulations on your arrangement Naruto. I actually am appreciative of you. Naruto blushed and gave Sakura one aftermost beam afore he watched her arch out appear the gate. Appropriate afore she abolished from sight. He remembered article and yelled afterwards her, Sakura-chan wait. Can we still get cafeteria tomorrow? It afraid him how afraid he was to ask that question. However, as anon as she smiled aback his all-overs vanished. She nodded her arch afore jumping assimilate the rooftops. Abrogation the albino ninja abandoned in the courtyard with his thoughts. Naruto airtight his accommodation aperture abaft him and bound removed his assimilation wet shinobi sandals and atramentous jacket. He took added affliction to adhere up his mother's bandage afore authoritative his way to the bathroom. Quickly, he affronted the baptize on as hot as it could go. Afresh removed the butt of his accoutrement and stepped in. A beef able his aperture and the hot baptized decrepit his beard and ran bottom-ward his back. His arch adequate on his acquaint adjoined the bank as he approved to agitate the angel of Sakura out of his head. He had to action aggregate that had happened in the aftermost few hours. Earlier that day he had been declared as 7th Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village. It would be actually a while afore he actually sat in the Hokage's arrangement and affected the position, but he couldn't affliction less, for all absorbed in purposes, he had able his constant dream. Now all he had to do was delay and let the approaching comedy out. That wasn't alike abutting to the capital affair on his mind. He agi his arch aback and let the baptized bang adjoin his bankrupt eyes. The additional Kakashi had appeared him. His anatomy had taken over. Before he knew it, he had landed at her advanced door. He hadn't meant to do it, and the adventure there was a becloud in his mind. The abandoned affair that remained ablaze was that she was the abandoned actuality. He could brainstorm administration the account with first. In that instant, he had abandoned about all his efforts to ambit himself and abandoned capital to see his best friend. He could accept never estimated area the night would end up. It didn't abruptness him that Sakura was as aflame as she was. That allotment he had expected, aggregate abroad that happened, however, was an absolute action for him. Her falling on top of him, his duke on her lips, the walk, administration his family's keepsake with her, cogent her about how it happened, pushing her on the swing, activity her easily on his back, her confession, his anchor anchored and he began angrily ablution his bark with soap. Her confession, could she actually be over Sasuke? Aloof like that? It would explain why annihilation had happened back the Uchiha returned. Afresh again. He couldn't admonition but admiration if Sasuke instigated something. Would she reciprocate? So abounding questions popped into his mind, and he had answers to none of them, and afresh there was that look, that abuse look. All Naruto could anticipate was that he capital to see it again. Afterwards, all their years together, Naruto anticipation that he is apparent every one of Sakura's expressions. Yet, this one was new. She looked almost wanting, almost desperate. He anticipation to himself, it had to be his imagination. There was no way Sakura Haruno was attractive at him with any affectionate of desire. He pushed the anticipation out of his head. Damn it, he said cautiously as a breach formed in the bend of his eye. I was so close, so abutting to effective on, and afresh she drags me appropriate aback in, and I let her. I about begged her to. It took so little, his apperception attempt back to the acute arrangement in the acreage of iron. He remembered his affection disturbing in two aback she approved to affected her animosity for him. He hadn't been able to Betty by for an anniversary afterwards that, and alike now the anguish aching like hell. I'm so abuse weak. He decrepit into his forearm. He was jolted out of his thoughts aback. He acquainted the baptize about face alga to join his neck. Absolution out a bendable sigh. He affronted the baptize off and effective and hydrate dark on the aback of the door. He broiled his aureate hair, rubbed the blow of the baptize off of his body, and headed into his bedroom. The bed creaked aback. He flopped bottomward on it, groaning one aftermost time. He airtight the lights off and active his arch in his pillow. Annihilation was activity to get apparent tonight, so he absentatively to force himself to bed, or at atomic he approved to for a solid bristles account afore absolution out a glottal scream, and throwing his pillow adjoin the window, he sat cocked in his bed, beyond his legs, and austere his mind, he bare to allocution to someone, and there was abandoned one actuality he could anticipate of that he currently had admission to. Hey Kurama! You awake? Get up you apathetic fox. I charge to talk. With that, Naruto abolished into the belly of his own apperception to allege with the demon fox that alleged his anatomy home. Sakura sat beyond from her best friend, rival, and a new affronted acquaintance at a bounded tea boutique abutting to their apartment. The buyer had migrated to the hidden leaf from the hidden cloud afterwards the war. The two attached had a non-burst in adulation with the adopted adornment and affable account that the quaint tea boutique emitted, her audacity adequate on her duke as she played with the harbinger afraid out of her drink. She had gone appropriate to Betty by a back she got home aftermost night, abundant to Ino's dismay. Her best acquaintance had hounded her for capacity about area she had been. And aback she noticed the bloom and embarrassment she had about looked into her memories to acquisition out what was up. Sakura assuredly managed to bulwark her off by able they could get breakfast afore her about face at the hospital. Not that she minded. She admired spending time with Ino, and she badly bare to unload about the affections she couldn't assume to shake. You attending rested? Sakura looked up as her acquaintance gave her a 18-carat smile. I haven't apparent you attending this well this animate in a while. Sakura alternate the expression. It was true. For the accomplished 2 weeks Sakura knew she hadn't been sleeping well. A bloom beyond her face as she anticipation of the acumen she had slept so soundly. Naruto, the arduous abatement of accepting acquaintance with him again. Accumulated with accepting affections she had been captivation in for a connected time off her chest, was abundant to actually beating her out. She anticipation about the night before. She couldn't get the activity of his easily on her aback to go away, and her audacity still acquainted area his deride had wiped abroad her tears. She had acquainted so safe with him, and all he had done was acquaint her she was okay. So, are you activity to acquaint me what happened, or am I gonna accept to pry it out of you? Sakura shuddered at her friend's words. She knew Ino was actually able and didn't appetite to analysis her friend. She sighed and looked up at her friend. I was with Naruto. Big abruptness there. But a little backward to be dark out with your admirer on a academy night, isn't it? Ino teased and attempt out her tongue, aforeseeing her acquaintance bloom and abstain her boring again. Ino aback abandoned the actor act. She could acquaint this was gonna be a austere conversation. What happened? Well, he had some big account he capital to share. Sakura bent herself afore continuing. Naruto had asked her to accumulate his Hokage arrangement abstruse, and she didn't plan on breaking her word. About the timeline of his advance to Jounin, it's accident faster than accepted, and he was actually aflame in capital to acquaint me. Ino aloft in countenance at her friend. That it? She asked afore demography a sip of her tea. No, pig, that's not it. We absolutely to go for a walk, and concluded up at the academy. We sat in the courtyard for a while and talked, and she paused for a second, afore absolution out a abysmal breath. She knew that if she didn't accord her acquaintance the accomplished adventure, any admonition she would accept wouldn't do her any good. Can I alpha over? She asked, and her acquaintance smiled and nodded. Sakura told Ino everything, admitting still abrogation out the account about Naruto's appointment. She anecdotal how she had burst on top of him, their arrangement on the swing, and her cogent him her animosity about Sasuke. She explained to her acquaintance the collywobbles that she had been accepting in her abdomen every time they were close, and how sad she had been aback he had abandoned her for the aftermost 2 weeks. By the end, Sakura was angry aback tears as she able bushing her acquaintance in. Ino adeptness be loud and annoying at times, but she was additionally an absurd listener. She nodded and commented on aggregate. Sakura said, allurement questions which the pinkette answered to the best of her ability. Aback Sakura able her story. Ino sat in blackout for a few moments, demography in what her acquaintance had told her. Finally, she looked aback to Sakura and started bedlam hysterically. To the point area she about fell out of her chair. What the hell is so funny, pig? Abashed Sakura able beyond the table and effective Ino by her collar. Ino kept bedlam until she assuredly was able to calm herself down. You are. Both of you. She wiped her eyes and took a behemothic alcohol of her alcohol in adjustment to achieve her composure. You are both so dark to the bearings that you can't see what's appropriate in advance of you. Ino, what are you aggravating to essay? Sakura, you adulation Naruto, don't you? Time stood still for Sakura. Her eyes widened and her animation got bent in her throat. The harbinger she was arena with fell aback into her alcohol as her accoutrements went aloof at her sides. Ahe starred agape beeline ahead. No best absorption on the albino in advance of her. She approved to say something, but couldn't accompany herself to accomplish any sound. Ino captivated a back addition fit of amusement as she watched her best acquaintance abbreviate ambit in advance of her. Afterwards cat and mouse a minute for her acquaintance to respond. She connected on, don't try to adumbrate it from me, forehead. I apperceive you bigger than that. I accept you're confused. But anybody abroad has apparent the signs for a while. The way you two adhere out. The looks you accord him aback he isn't watching, the annoying way he answers your every allure and call bleh. She ashore out her argot and fabricated a gagging motion. It's abhorrent really, but it's additionally affectionate of adorable. The ability hit her harder than one of her mentor's punches. Sakura's jaw afraid accessible as she assuredly managed to cull herself together. I love Naruto? You do, don't exhausted yourself up over it too much. It was abandoned an amount of time. I mean, he is the one who has been with you from the beginning. He's consistently been by your side. Ino was about to abide aback. She noticed tears silently falling from her best friend's face. Sakura, don't cry. This is an acceptable thing. How is this an acceptable thing? She screamed at her best friend, accepting the absorption of the added 2 barter in the tea shop. I can't adulation him. I can't alike him. I aloof can't. I accept put him through so much. I accept abandoned his animosity for years. The tears connected to abatement bottomward Sakura's face and she didn't stop them. I aching him, I bankrupt his heart, and now, I'm declared to apprehend him to aloof absolve me. That's not how this works, Ino. I don't get a blessed catastrophe with him. He deserves so abundant bigger than me. After a few account of crying, and accepting Ino appear over to rub her back, Sakura managed to calm down. She wiped the tears from her eyes but connected to beam bottomward aback her acquaintance alternate to her seat. Feel any better? Sakura nodded her arch hardly aback Ino's duke able out and effective her own. Sakura, I get how you are feeling, a lot of what you said is valid, but the absoluteness is you don't get to adjudge what he deserves. He does. I'm not assuming to apperceive what goes on in that knucklehead's brain, but I do apperceive there is a acumen that he isn't with any of those annoying fangirls or alike with Hinata. The name fabricated Sakura wince as an alpha set of tears threatened to booty hold. She had been aggravating her best to avoid the anticipation of Hinata. She was actively acquainted of the Hyuga's animosity appear Naruto, but at the time hadn't alike accustomed her own. Now that she was starting to, the aftermost affair she bare was to feel alike guiltier. All I am adage is don't avoid your heart. I don't apperceive what that acumen is, but if I was a action babe I would bet it was you. She gave her acquaintance a balmy hug which she acquiescently returned, thanking her for the support. After a few added account of abstracted down, Sakura took a attending at the alarm on the wall. It apprehends 7:45. I accept to go, my about face starts in 10 minutes, and I anticipate I am declared to accommodated Naruto for lunch, aloof what I need. She decrepit the aftermost allotment below her breath. Thanks a fresh Ino, no botheration forehead. Don't accent too much, aggregate will assignment itself out eventually, and if it doesn't, you can consistently accompany me and sigh for some fun. Sakura formed her eyes afore abrogation abundant money for her alcohol additional tip. She smiled one added time at Ino afore headed to the hospital. Sakura connected her accoutrements over her arch as she exited Konoha Hospital. She burst as the algid air accursed her face, and an able access of wind pushed the awning of her covering off her head. It wasn't snowing but was still algid abundant to beating out any post-shift fatigue she was feeling. She had abandoned formed a abbreviate about face, and was animated to accept the blow of the day and night off to get some much-needed rest. Sakura had to asphyxiate a beam aback she saw him. It wasn't how she accepted to acknowledge afterwards her allocution with Ino, and she was beholden for that, granted. She did alarm the agglomeration in her throat that hadn't been there previously, but the afterimage in advance of her accepted confusing abundant for her to avoid it. There he was, aptitude to join one of the pillars of the hospital gate, one leg on the arena and one leg aloft to abutment himself. His accoutrements were bankrupt beyond his chest, and his arch was ag down. His eyes were bankrupt and the atomic band of dribble able his beggared lips. Naruto had burst comatose continuing up, she absolved up to him, and any time so acclaim pushed on his shoulder, it wasn't much. but accustomed that he was actually a gape out, it fabricated him lose his antithesis and acreage on the arena with a loud thud. His eyes attempt accessible, and he anon jumped up into a action stance. He looked about rapidly in every direction. Who, what, when, where, how? He said afore his eyes assuredly begin the bedlam pink-haired woman staring aback at him. He pouted in her direction, which abandoned acquired her to be more. Very funny, Sakura-chan. I couldn't admonition it. You gave me the absolute opportunity. She smirked at him and began to walk. He bound fell into band abutting to her, and the brace began to walk. Naruto had as easily abaft his arch in his accepted stance, and Sakura pushed her easily into her pockets, aggravating to accumulate warm. She had to action the collywobbles that were aggressive to backfire out of her abdomen. Aback, he smiled in her direction. Long day? She asked. It was attenuate for Naruto to be tired, and she was a little added anxious than she cared to admit. Yet truth be told, I didn't Betty buy that abundant aftermost night. He shrugged and connected walking. Sorry about that. I didn't beggarly to accumulate you out. Accomplished your bedtime, my lord? She winked in his administration, and he let out a abysmal beam which fabricated her affection skip a beat. She admired authoritative him laugh, and hadn't able it until that moment. When did messing with him become so additional nature? Aback, did they become so adequate about anniversary other? Now that she anticipation about it, she estimated it actually was a bit-by-bit affair. Afterwards the war ended. It takes two to tango, my lady. He alternate her announcement afore abashed a bit and breaking eye contact. Sakura didn't apprehension as she was actually focused on advancement, her own composure. Is it Chiraku's okay? He asked, and a beam of diaphoresis appeared on his forehead. Sakura giggled. She knew it was coming, but it was still nice of him to ask. There was a day aback he would accept aloof abjector there, but it was acceptable to see he had developed up a bit. That actually works. I haven't been activity fat abundant afresh anyway. Naruto yelled article about ramen actuality, the abandoned all-important aliment accumulation, and Sakura bankrupt out laughing. The two connected walking to his admired place, authoritative baby talk. Naruto got bent up on her after most 2 weeks at work, and she abstruse about some of the specifics for his accelerated jounin training. Sakura didn't apprehension Naruto cheating glances at her whenever she wasn't looking. The absolute time, Sakura could feel her affection in her chest. It's Naruto, it's aloof Naruto, don't do annihilation brainless Sakura. She afreshed these words in her arch like a mantra, so abundant so she didn't apprehend they had accustomed at their destination until Naruto aerial the flaps that served as an aperture to the ramen bar. He ushered her inside. Both of their aperture abandoned to the attic. Aback, they saw an anytime aloof Sasuke Uchiha sitting abandoned at the ramen bar. He was cautiously alarming on his noodles, and his aperture was open, accessible to booty a bite. Aback, he noticed his two teammates. He blinked 3 times afore boring, putting the noodles into his mouth. Naruto and Sakura stood frozen. As they watched their acquaintance apprehend, he had been bent to Miss Bistro at Ichiraku's by himself. Finally, they both bankrupt out bedlam afore demography a bench beside him. I anticipation you hated this abode, Sasuke? Sakura teased afore acclamation her accepted from the old man abaft the counter. Sasuke shrugged. It was a budding by. I haven't gotten advantage for my abode yet. It's his fault. Sasuke acicular to Naruto with his chopsticks afore continuing to eat his meal. Naruto, on the added hand, was internally screaming, "Oh, appear on!" He thought, this was declared to be my time with her, and he had to appearance up, aloof great. I am actually activity to bang his ass later. However, he was able to force a beam assimilate his face and addled up a chat with his two teammates, alike if the bearings wasn't ideal. He was animated that all 3 of them could absorb time and eat together. It wasn't absent on him how connected he had dreamed for this day. The aggregation was disconnected. Aback, the flaps of the ramen angle opened again. This time it was Sakura's about-face to anathema. Internally aback, she saw the Hyuga almsman airing into the now awash restaurant. She greeted anybody in the restaurant with a balmy smile, afore her eyes landed on Naruto. Great! Now it's a party! She anticipation to herself afore abiding Hinata's greening and axis her absorption to her element aback it was brought out. She abandoned any act of affection about aback the Byakugan user began to allege to Naruto. Naruto-kun? I anticipation I adeptness acquisition you here. Do you accept a second? There was article I capital to allocution to you about. If that's okay, Hinata blushed as she managed to get out the sentence. It's accept if now isn't an acceptable time. Sakura's affection sank and she had to attending abroad for abhorrence that her affections would get the bigger of her. Naruto didn't notice, but Sasuke did. He couldn't admonition a baby beam anatomy on his face. About abuse time, he thought. Naruto couldn't accept his luck. Out of all the times Hinata could accept call to ask for a clandestine conversation, she had to aces today. Not to acknowledgement that with his animosity for Sakura actuality as able as they were afterwards aftermost night, he didn't actually apperceive what he would do if she approached the accountable he had been alienated for a while. All he capital to do was absorb some time with his best friend. He sighed afore resigning himself to fate and smiled aback at her. Sure, Hinata. Let me aloof accomplishment my. Afore he could accomplishment, however, his eyes narrowed. Everything abroad happened so quickly. He attempts Sasuke a glance as the Uchiha nodded his head. Sakura looked abashed until she sensed the ancestry of Naruto infusing chakra. Afore either of the two women could react, they both acquainted Naruto's accoutrements about their waists. He spun to absorb them, and they were aback engulfed in the ablaze chicken chakra of his nine tails form. In the breach additional, it had taken the chakra arch of a fox to booty appearance about them. Sasuke covered it with his own Susanoo armor, but not afore avaricious old man Tuchi and affairs him into the arresting absorber abaft Naruto. Not a moment later, the ramen boutique exploded into an accumulation of white and dejected fire. The complete was oral as a fire copse and metal airtight adjoined the chakra that was attention the group. It was so ablaze and so hot that alike Sasuke had to absorber his eyes for abhorrence of actuality blinded. Aback the ablaze cleared. Sakura looked about and the afterimage she saw about brought her to tears. As Naruto's fox absorber disappeared, she could get a blaze appearance of what had happened. Aggregate oral a 2-block ambit of the ramen boutique was decimated. It looked like the pain aggression from afore the war. Bodies were screaming, barrio had collapsed, and the aforementioned dejected and white blaze engulfed their ambience and was bound spreading. She looked at Naruto's baleful austere expression, and at Sasuke's duke on his katana as she assuredly able what was happening. They were below attack.